Colin, I am really excited to interview you. This is really cool. I have your book here, The 12-Hour Walk, and I just have to read from the back. I mean, this is amazing. A 10-time world-breaking explorer. That's fantastic. New York Times bestselling author of The Impossible First, entrepreneur, speaker, and expert on mindset. So that really caught my attention because mind is my wheelhouse. So I'm really thrilled to hear your wisdom and to share your wisdom of all the amazing things that you've done with my audience. So I want to let you tell my audience the amazing things that you've done and achieved.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, it's a pleasure to be here with you and someone with your level of expertise with science and knowledge of the brain. This is going to be a fun conversation because
I think so.
Dove very deep into my own mind and mindset and encourage others to do the same. But I imagine you have an even more scientific understanding of what's happening up there. I love to say the most important muscle that any of us have is the 6 inches between the ears. And so it's going to be a fun conversation.
It is.
People say, what do you do? Who are you? It's a little bit of a broad question. I guess I'm most known for these world record breaking expeditions, becoming the first person in history to cross the entire continent of Antarctica solo, pulling a 375-pound sled, rode a rowboat across Drake Passage, the most dangerous ocean stretch in the world, in a tiny little rowboat, something that no one else had ever accomplished, from, 40-foot swells and from the southern tip of South America to Antarctica, 750 miles in the craziest ocean. So things of that nature. But also, I have a deep passion for not just pushing my body in unique and extreme ways, but really taking those lessons that I've learned and kind of offering them up in digestible for people that don't necessarily want to go freeze their butt off and walk across Antarctica. I don't think everyone wants to do that. I don't want to
do that, but I'd like to learn from you for sure. I am getting in any boat and going across wild waves. But I'm fascinated with the fact that you've done that. It's incredible. So I'm very interested in the mind that's driving your brain, because your brain doesn't do anything without your mind. So your mind that's driving your brain, I'm fascinated to hear about this in this interview.
Yeah. So it's fun and very excited. I know we'll get into it, but I'm excited about this new book, The 12-Hour Walk, that I just recently came out that I wrote. People are really loving it. At its core, it's a call to action for others. It's a call to action for people to take a journey of their own. I know we'll get into that, but to me, that's what's really lighting me up. I'm obviously happy to share the stories and from my own life and where I've learned and where I've failed and the ups and downs and things like that. But what lights me up the most is being able to pass that on in a way that other people can't just, don't just avoid it or entertained by it, but actually can take that lesson into their own life. And that's really what the 12-Hour Walk is, as the subtitle says, for other people, for you listening, to invest one day to conquer your own mind and to unlock your best life. And that's what the 12-Hour Walk, both the book and the global movement, aim to do.
Oh, that's beautiful. And I think what is really captivating about what you just said is something I hear so much from the field of work that I'm in and how many different people I interview, is when you've been through something as momentous as what you've done, which you did voluntarily, but you've still been through a very momentous, challenging, it couldn't have been, there must have been moments on those waves and in that cold that you thought, why am I doing this to myself? But the fact that something drove you, and I'm fascinated to hear that, and helped you to persevere. And then there's a lesson learned. But the core point I want to make is how you want to share that with others. And this is what I see so beautiful about humanity, is that we go through these deep experiences and immediately, hey, I learned this. Well, how can I use this to help others? And, you capture that in your book, which I think is wonderful. So thank you for doing that and for sharing that. So let me start with the question that is totally fascinating to me. What drives someone like yourself to do, and you've probably been asked this a million times, I'm sure you've got this answer totally off pat, but what is it about you, your mind, the unique way that you think and feel and choose, which is your mind in action, driving your brain, because your brain just tells your body just do what your mind tells it to do. So what is it about you that drives you to do these incredible expeditions? So answer that and then tell us a few stories, and then we'll dive into all the lessons.
I think that I have a deep curiosity for, kind of exploring externally is how that has manifested, but actually it's really an internal journey, right? Exploring what the human body, mind is capable of. But, for me, I'll bring you back to a moment in my life that was massively turning point for me, that Well, I was 22 years old, just graduated from college, university. And, I always wanted to see a little bit of the world. Didn't have a lot of money when I was a kid growing up, but I painted houses when I was young and decided, hey, I'm going to set off into the world for an adventure. And I saved up a few $1,000s, as cheap as you could possibly go, youth hostels, hitchhiking around, sleeping on friends' couches. But it was a great experience for me as a young person to experience a bit of the world. I grew up in a pretty low income background. And so that was, a big adventure for me. And great experience. I hitchhiked to New Zealand, surfed my way through Australia, found myself in Southeast Asia. It was amazing, all until a fateful night I was in Thailand, and there's these guys and they were jumping a flaming jump rope. And my 22-year-old self, you would know this better than anyone, without, I guess, a fully formed prefrontal cortex to tell me this was a dangerous situation. I was like, great, this looks like fun. What could possibly go wrong here? And in an instant, my life changed. I wrapped the rope around my body by tripping on it. It had excess kerosene. It sprayed my body. It lit me on fire completely to my neck. And survival mode kicked in. Thankfully, when I needed it most, I jumped into the ocean, which extinguished my body from the flames, but not before about 25% of my body was burned, predominantly my legs and feet. And I was on a small island in the Gulf of Thailand, so no proper medical facilities nearby. There was like a one-room nursing station. There was a moped ride down a dirt path instead of an ambulance ride. Not a place you want this experience to happen. And of course, the physical pain was immense. I mean, again, a bad circumstance. I had to undergo 8 surgeries. There was a cat running around my bed and across my chest in this makeshift ICU. I mean, just really not where you want to be in the situation. The worst part about it, there was the physical, obviously, pain of it. But about day 4 or day 5, the doctor walks in, he looks me in the eyes, and he's just being honest. He goes, "Hey, Colin, I hate to tell you this, but you will probably never walk again normally." And he's like, the way that the ankle joints, the ligaments, the tendons, et cetera, have been affected, you will probably not likely regain full mobility. And I was an athlete, also just any person, right? Like you're being, in an instant, you made a mistake and now you're no longer, who you thought you were. My identity was so wrapped up in sort of the physicality of my body at that point in my life. It was devastating. I mean, I
Very
immediately...
traumatic.
Yeah, downward spiral into this negative headspace of, oh my God, who am I? What does this all mean? I don't want to be here anymore, all the things. But the sort of positive frame on this story, and the heroine, I should say, is my mother. She arrived about day 4 or day 5, right around when I got this bad diagnosis. And I can only imagine what it's like to be a mother, to see your kid in this state, just like helpless feeling. She was pleading and crying with the doctors for any semblance of good news. They weren't giving it to her. But she actually never showed me her own fear. She never actually came into my hospital room crying or upset. She instead came into my hospital room every single day with this huge air of positivity, like daring me to dream about the future. And she said to me, and I talk about this concept in the 12-hour walk, what I call now, I didn't call it this at the time, but I call it the possible mindset. And I define that as,
your book. Mm-hmm.
I define that as an empowered way of thinking that unlocks a life of limitless possibilities. And in this moment, my mother said to me, let's dream without limits. This is a bad situation. Let's not try to pretend like it's not, but let's dream for a second without limits. What do you want to do when you get out of here? Let's set a goal. Let's work towards something. Close your eyes. And so she had me close my eyes. I did this visualization. And I said, I don't want to tell you what I saw. You're going to make fun of me. And she said, no, what is it? And I said, well, I saw myself crossing the finish line of a triathlon. Swimming, biking, running, I'm burnt in with these burnt legs. She could have very easily said, hey, you know what? I said set a goal, but maybe something more realistic. But instead she goes, actually, that's your goal. Great. Let's go for it. She goes, hey, doc, bring in some weights. She yells out to this Thai doctor, bring in some weights. And he's like, what? And she goes, yeah, he's training for a triathlon now. So I have this picture of myself in a Thai hospital, bandaged from the waist down, lifting 10-pound dumbbells with this look on the Thai doctor's face, like someone needs to smack some sense in this silly American kid.
And they found you dumbbells in this Thai hospital.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
very amused by that.
Yeah, so they had the dumbbells there. There's a photograph to prove it. It's a hilarious scene playing out. But the long story short of it is that my mother wrapped me in this sort of just this bubble of positivity. And it was several months I was in the Thai hospital, was flown home to the United States. And when I was still carried on and off the plane, I was in a wheelchair when I got home. And the doctors, still had this negative diagnosis, but through my mom's love, through her, encouragement, again, we'll talk about the mindset even more, kind of pushed me. And every single day I could take a few more steps. I learned to walk, I learned to run. And I eventually raced 18 months after being burnt in this accident. I raced my first triathlon. And
18 months you did
18
your first,
months.
I thought you were going to say 18 months later I started walking.
Yeah.
18 months you did a triathlon. My goodness, Colin.
The craziest part about it, very unexpected, there was about 5,000 people in the race that day. And to my complete and utter surprise, I didn't just finish the race, but I actually won. I placed first out of 5,000 people on the day.
That's just like crazy wonderful.
But the point, all the way back to, you said, why? Why do you do these expeditions? Why do you do these types of things? That's what you're asking me. And this was a massive turning point for me, which was at this finish line when I won this race. I didn't go back and go, oh, wow, I guess I'm just this superhuman person. I'm so amazing. I'm so incredible. Like, that's not what went back. I went back and it was so clear to me that my mind, and again, I wouldn't have gotten there on my own. Thank God for my mother. But my mind had so much strength and power to do either, to say, yep, this is my diagnosis. I'm never going to walk again. I should get used to being, the way that I am in this wheelchair, or not being full mobility in my legs ever in this, versus my mother wrapping me in this possible mindset. And again, of course, I worked hard. I battled back. I had to work on my body, but it started in my mind. And I realized at that finish line, what would have happened had my mom not forced me to look towards the future and set this measurable goal? But I realized, since I did, this is not just a me thing. I wasn't like, and you know this very well with your work, like I wasn't like, oh, Colin O Brady, I must just be, better than everyone else. I'm such a great athlete. No, all of us, every single human on this planet, we have reservoirs of untapped potential inside of us to achieve extraordinary things. But all of those things, even happiness, fulfillment, joy, love, all those things, they start with something in your mind and a decision for your body to follow. And so that lesson, although I had to learn it by burning myself in a fire, and I wish I hadn't done that, it was a powerful and potent lesson. And now 15 years since that burn accident, I sit here with, 10 world records that I use those same legs with, and various other things. And they all have really been from the essence of mindset and that mindset shift.
That is just incredible. Thank you for sharing that. It's incredible. And it's just so, it's just really more confirmation for me of the work that I do, because I've seen over my years of being in the field, people overcome incredible odds, and you now are part of that group of people that I have just seen, and it shows me more and more it's our mind. If you dead, your mind's not working. The fact that you're alive, it's your mind that's driving every bit of what's happening in your body. You make 800,000 to 1 million cells every second. And it's because you're alive. If you're dead, you're not making them. And the quality of those cells is dependent on your mind. And my point being, Colin, in those moments when your mom wrapped you in that possibilities mindset and got you to visualize, I don't know how long that was, but probably an hour, a couple of hours. Just think of how many new cells you made, and those quality of those cells. And this is just such a basic thing, but I'm just showing a direct link between mind and body here. Is that those cells then determine your organs, your systems, etc. In other words, your body quality, your DNA, your telomeres, etc. And in other words, your mind drove the health of those. And you started on a journey of your body getting to a point where you could heal to that point. And so it was your mind driving it. And we live in an environment, and I think that you've got this by the fact that you've written this book. I know you've got this. We live in an environment that is immersing us in fragility. We don't have resilience. Once broken, you're always broken. At the same time, there's a lot of motivational speakers out there that are speaking against this, but the general messaging is that as humans, we're not as strong as what the whole mental health movement and everything is, yet your story is counter to that. You've shown that obviously it wasn't all, joy and roses. I'm sure you were very depressed at times. You said you wanted to give up and probably wanted to die at times. So it wasn't easy, but there was something in your inner depth of your unconscious mind that kept you going. And that's what you're trying, if I understand you correctly, please correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what you're trying to bring out to people, is that tap into that mind.
100%.
It's powerful.
Yeah, no, and the book is definitely not told from the point of view of a highlight reel of my life. Oh, look at me, I did this, I'm awesome. It's the opposite of that. It's saying, hey, here's some lessons that I have learned by pushing my mind and body in such extreme and such intense ways. But guess what? You don't have to go all the way to Antarctica. You don't have to go to the summit of Everest to do this. This exists within you. The 12-hour walk is a call to action for people to literally walk out their front door, put their phone on airplane mode, take a day, and walk without music, without podcasts, and look and analyze, have a deep look at their own mind, their own interior dialogue, their own thoughts, because I believe we are held back by a series of somewhat common limiting beliefs that loop in our minds. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough time. I'm not strong enough. What if I fail? What if people criticize me, right? These what if sort of fears. But this 12-hour walk both gives you a moment, as well as, again, the book itself. We can talk more about the details, but it gets into the essence of how can we rewrite those narratives? How can we make those shifts? And through the 12-hour walk, I've literally seen that, as the subtitle says, invest one day. This 12-hour walk is a roadmap for you to make a huge shift emotionally and mentally in just a day that has a ripple effect for weeks and months and years to come after that.
No, that's amazing. So it's like a catalyst of putting people in the right direction. And it's very exciting because I've developed a system called the Neurocycle that is how you use your mind to drive your brain. And you're basically working on this constant, it's basically mind management. And what you're doing with your 12-hour walk is you're taking your mind and you're sort of launching it into a state of being where you can get to know yourself, and you bring up the concept of all these thoughts that we have, these intrusive thoughts, which pretty much every human deals with. And they're always seen as those negative things, but actually they're full of messengers. And if I'm hearing you correctly, and from what I've seen of your book, you are encouraging people to get in touch with those, which is something I always say to people as well in the work that I do, is that your intrusive thoughts are your best friend because they're filled with messages. So once you get in touch with them, you can actually learn from them and you can move them in another direction. So this is what your 12-hour walk, I think, is helping to catalyze people into, to sort of launch them in like here's they launch you into space kind of thing, and from there we go. So you have on page 26, you actually, because people are thinking, okay, 12-hour, one day, whatever, and you've got 6 points of the walk. Might sound simple. I'm just reading from your book here on page 26. And in a lot of ways it is, but there's a power in simplicity. I totally agree with that statement. And one might say magic. Totally agree with that too. Without a doubt, the directions are simple to follow. So can you walk us through very basically these steps? I'm going to read them out loud first, and then if you could talk us through them. So it's commit, unplug, record, walk, rest, reflect. Okay, so, and this is what they do over 12 hours. So can you walk us through that? And then obviously people will get hold of your book to learn more. I wanted to make this really powerful. What I'd love to do is I'd love you to springboard that onto maybe one of your stories or a couple of your stories, if you want to go into one in depth, or if you want to choose and just launch out how you this came out of that. Now I lost this place. I just think it'd be great to then link it to maybe the Antarctica or the waves on the or elements of it, however you want to do it, so that we build the 100%. Little bridge between the two.
Yeah, so we'll get into the steps, but I'll bring you back into a story, because I think the origin story is very powerful of sort of where I came up with 12-hour walk. So I walked across Antarctica solo, 54 days, 1,000 miles, pulling a 375-pound sled. It was an expedition that people had attempted previous to me. No one had been successful accomplishing it. And I literally called my expedition, also the name of my first book, The Impossible First, because I didn't know if it could be possible, but I wanted to try, was willing to try. I told myself the longest I could possibly pull my sled when I was out there was 10 hours. It's minus 40 degrees. It's brutal conditions. The wind's blowing in your face. There's just no way. On day one, hour one, I couldn't pull my sled. Literally, the first day, my sled was so heavy, I couldn't pull it. And I felt so sorry for myself that I started crying. And what happens when you cry and it's minus 40 degrees outside? Well, it turns out the tears, they start freezing to your face, which is like the all-time most pathetic feeling ever.
It sounds so sore.
Now, a whole other side part of that is that another guy was attempting the crossing at the very same time, unbeknownst to me until I got down there. So I literally ended up in a cargo plane sitting next to this badass British explorer by the name of Captain Lou Rudd, getting dropped off on the edge of Antarctica, not just racing history, but now in a head-to-head, mano-a-mano, 1,000-mile race to see who would become the first person to make this crossing.
Oh, wow. How did that happen? I mean, the chances of that happening are like so remote.
Yeah, two of us planned it, and there's one guy with one plane that can take you down. So we called the same logistics guy, and he was like, yeah, I can take you down there as a day. And so we're sitting shoulder to shoulder like, oh, wait, you're trying to do the exact same thing as me. What? This turned into a race all of a sudden, which is wild. So anyways, he kicks my butt in the first week, by the way. And when I'm crying with my frozen tears, he's like off and gone and completely gone. I caught up to him on the 6th day, and we end up walking shoulder to shoulder beside each other in this intense battle, not talking to each other. And I thought, man, 10 hours, the longest I could possibly go. I get to 8 hours, he's still right next to me. I get to 9 hours, he's still right next to me. I get to 10 hours, he's still right next to me. He's still marching along. We're both pretending like the other one's not there. 11 hours goes by, now further than I ever thought I could go in a single day with this much weight behind me. And he finally reaches down and pulls out his sled, or pulls out his tent, excuse me. And I'm like, he's going to stop. And I pull my sled 1 step further, or 1 hour further, and I finished 12 hours. Now, I talked to my wife on my satellite phone that night. That's my first lead in this race. It's only 6 days in. We have another 50 some to go if we're going to make it. And she says to me, I've been waiting to tell you this, but you're going to run out of food or fuel if you don't go at least 12 hours every single day. So it's great you did it once, because I was like, I did it once. It's more than I ever thought I could do. You can do it
again.
No,
Wow.
She literally was like, yeah, so I'm going to need you to do that 50 more times without taking a day off at all. I need you to walk 12 hours per day, every single day, 50 more times. And she was right. I needed to do that. That's what I did. I ended up getting there first by a few days, but more importantly, I was on my last bite of food. My body was completely, my hip bones were sticking out. My ribs were sticking out. I was starving. I had frost nip on my face. My body was declining in a very significant way. But what happened is actually my mind got sharper and sharper and stronger as I was out there. I tapped into these waves of deep fulfillment, connection to family, to spirit, to love, to empathy, to community, and felt this sort of resonant, beautiful, beautiful positivity. As my body was getting weaker, my mind was getting stronger.
Wow, this is insanely wonderful.
And I thought to myself, I guess I can just take this back with me forever. I found this place in my mind. I can always come back here. And for a time that was true. And of course, these lessons from crossing Antarctica have stuck with me. And of course, will always be there in some capacity. But a couple of years later, I did some other expeditions in between there. A couple of years later, my first book was out, just at the New York Times bestsellers list. I'm doing the book tour. I'm about to leave another expedition. Boom, COVID hits, right? Disrupts every life. Book tours canceled, all the things I have canceled, et cetera. And don't get me wrong, my book tour being canceled or my expedition being canceled is like the least of the world's problems, but it's just a scary time, right? Like I end up locked in my house. Everything I thought that I was doing, which is getting all this positive momentum, is completely disrupted and canceled. And I'm sitting in my family's house in the Oregon coast, just me, my wife, and my dog. And I've completely lost this place I found in my mind in Antarctica. Instead, I'm full of anxiety. I'm full of fear. I'm full of doubt. My wife looks over at me at one point. She goes, you haven't changed out of your pajamas in about 3 days. You've been sitting on the couch, just like doom scrolling my news and social media and like all the bad headlines. This person's dying. This happened. This horrible thing happened, right? Super sad time. And for time, I think everyone on this planet experienced that. And she's trying to kind of encourage me. And I thought, when was the last time I felt connected? When was the last time I felt strong in my mind and my body, my spirit? And I was like, strangely enough, as hard as this Antarctica crossing was, I actually found it out there walking alone in silence and stillness. And so I said to my wife, this might sound ridiculous, but I'm going to go on a walk tomorrow out our front door, just all day long, might be even 12 hours. I'll see you around dinner time. And she's like, great, have fun. She just kind of laughs because she knows I do these ridiculous things sometimes. So I walk out the front door. And when I walk out the front door, I look down, 20 minutes in, my phone buzzes in my pocket. And I'm like, okay. I reach out my phone, about to text my friend back who's texting me. I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I've just been staring at my social media, staring at my phone. I'm on this walk. I'm outside. Now I'm staring at my phone again. Like, I don't need to be doing this right now. So I put my phone on airplane mode and continue the rest of the walk. No music, no podcast, no external inputs, just me alone with my thoughts. And it's difficult and it's challenging. And I take breaks. It's not like I'm walking the entire time. I take some rest breaks, whatever, but I walk for 12 hours. And I tap back into this place I had found in my mind in Antarctica, this stillness, this silence, this peace, this feeling of fulfillment. And when I walk back in the front door, my dog jumps up on me and my wife says, you're back. And I say to her, yeah, I told you I was coming back around this time. And she goes, no, you're back. Like my spirit was back. She could just see it without me really saying anything. And she was right. And I was like, this is the best that I have felt in a really long time. But I said, look, like I'm not sure, this is for everyone else. Like I'm the guy who walked across Antarctica. Great. I can go on a long walk and it's positive for me, but I didn't necessarily think there was broad applications to this until I had all sorts of friends, family members, colleagues, people fit, not so fit, young, old, et cetera, going through hard times during COVID. And I started just mentioning this to people. Well, hey, I did this thing and it changed everything for me. Before I knew it, lots of people started taking me up on this sort of call to action and, doing, hey, I just did the 12-hour walk. I took a day and I did that. And people kept coming back overwhelmingly positive. This was exactly what I needed. I needed a break from my phone. I needed to check in with myself. I needed to look inside the things that I've been looping negatively in my brain. It was hard. It was challenging, but it was amazing. And now the 12-hour walk, look, we'll talk about those 6 steps in a second. It meets you right where you're at. It doesn't matter if you go for 1 mile or 50 miles, and you don't have to be crazy fit. This means you don't have to train for this. This is for you to do exactly your pace. My 77-year-old mother-in-law has quite literally done the 12-hour walk. And for her, it was one time around her block and then sitting on her front porch and resting in stillness and silence. And then another time around her block, but she's committed to the entire 12 days. And so this book, it'll entertain you. It's exciting. It's a page turner. It's full of wisdom and advice and fun stories. But at its core, it's not just saying, hey, take my word for it. This lives and dies on the page. This is actually saying, take your own word for it. Go find out for your own self. Take your own 12-hour walk. And my goal is to inspire 10 million people to take this 12-hour walk. It's completely free. It's out your front door. You can do it any day of the week. But you can sign up on my website, 12hourwalk.com. I become your accountability partner, send you some emails and FAQs and things like that. But those 6 steps of how you actually do the walk, as you read off before, are clean. They're simple. So the first is commit. As I said, go to the website, pick up the copy of the book, pick a date and put it on your calendar. That we know the psychology behind actually committing to something like that, highly, highly increases the odds that you're actually going to complete it. The second is record. So I ask people to, on their phone, just record a video for yourself. It doesn't have to be for anybody else. You don't have to share it on social media if you don't want. It's like just for you to have a touch point. Hey, my intention for this walk is this. And of course, the book itself helps frame some thoughts, ideas, and framework around that. But to set an intention for the moment. And then unplug. Put your phone on airplane mode. Bring it with you for safety. Have it in your pocket. I actually have an app that I've built that helps track the miles of your walk so you can know where you are. You don't get lost, but it works in airplane mode. So you don't have to have your notifications, your social media, your email, all this stuff. You're taking a day away from that. And so you put your phone on airplane mode. And then, of course, probably the most important step is walk. You walk, committing for 12 hours. Go wherever you want. You can be in an urban setting. If you're in a big city like a New York City or Los Angeles, whatever, the stillness and silence is your own commitment to it. It's okay if there's other cars nearby or other things, passing through. This is your own commitment to the stillness and the silence. Rest. Take as many breaks as you want. I mentioned my mother-in-law. It doesn't matter. This isn't like, punish yourself and see how far you can go. This is not a race. My ultra marathon friend that does 50 miles is not doing the 12-hour walk any better than my mother-in-law who's going, only a couple of miles. Like they're both doing the walk because they're committing to them. It's a mental exercise. This is you training your mind.
It's a mental exercise. Mm-hmm.
And then the last is reflect. When you get back to your front door, the same thing. Reflect on this. What did you overcome? What came up for you? What limiting beliefs were you battling in your mind while you're out there? What do you feel more equipped with now that you have this possible mindset on the other side? And so that is its essence is what the 12-hour walk is, what this movement is. There are thousands of people around the world already participating in the walk. And I hope those listening will join those and increase more and more people doing this walk. My goal is to inspire 10 million people to do it.
Oh, this is wonderful. I love the whole concept of the whole unplug, the process that you describe, and that the whole getting into your mind and thinking. One of the things that I have seen so much with the research that I've done, and it's something that I've actually also written about as well, is the thinker mindset. We don't take time to just stop and to think anymore because we're so busy. So they unplug and people are aware of that. But I mean, there's research being done by Harvard showing that people don't even want to sit for 16 minutes. And I'm talking about 18 to 77-year-olds, not not Gen Z, the whole lot, and even young, and that people would rather, they're battling to even sit for 16 minutes. When you think of Rodin's statue, the thinker, the Rodin, the famous sculptor, the leaning on his hand, we've kind of forgotten to do that. So when you're saying this, I'm thinking inside and thinking to myself, this is fantastic because I'm always telling people to stop and think, just unplug, even if it's 10 minutes in the middle of the day. So I really believe that is vital in terms of neuroscience. When you do what you've just described, you are totally activating the default mode network in the brain as well as the whole brain. But you are it's like an orchestra within the networks of your brain that actually is driven by your mind because your brain does nothing on its own. So your mind's driving it. And when you go into the processes that you've described, you're actually allowing your physical brain to regenerate because your mind never stops, but your brain gets tired and it doesn't stop either, but it gets exhausted and needs regeneration. And And without these rest periods or these times where we do what you've described, our brain doesn't function like it should. And your mind's got to use the brain. So if the brain's a mess, the mind really battles. And if the mind's a mess, the brain's a mess. So in other words, you are helping to sort of unplug. So there's a lot of neuroscience behind this as well, which is really interesting, in the mind-brain-body connection stuff. So I love it. I think it's fantastic. Now, Colin, you obviously, you've done quite a few expeditions, but just very quickly, what I'd love to do in the last few minutes we have together, tell us just in terms of some of the other ones. You've done the Antarctica thing, but you've got 10-time world-breaking. What were the others? I want to know the others. If we can kind of wrap up with that, I'd love to know the others because they sound so exciting.
Yeah. So, I was the first person to walk across Antarctica solo. I set the speed record on something called the Explorer's Grand Slam. So I climbed the tallest mountain on each of the 7 continents faster than anyone, as well as going to the North and South Pole. So the speed record for something called the Explorer's Grand Slam. So that's Everest, Kilimanjaro, Denali, etc., as well as the North and South Pole, all in 139 days. I also set the speed record for the 7 summits by themselves, the 7 tallest mountains on each continent. I rowed a boat, first person in history to row a boat across Drake Passage, so the most treacherous stretch of ocean in the world, in a rowboat. The 50 high points, so the tallest mountain in each of the 50 US states, all 50 of those in 21 days. So there's stories from all of these adventures as well as other parts of my life in this book. One interesting sort of concluding thought is, I really encourage everyone, and I love your science lens. You shared some of it, which I love, which is that mind-body connection and I know anecdotally why this is powerful. I have watched this literally over and over and over again. People struggle. People are challenged. People are pressed when they're out there, but they get back to their front door and they're like so deeply grateful, elated, different, grown, evolved. It's very powerful and potent. But as you said, it's like, some people they're thinking about this. Oh, the physicality of this might be challenging, and sure, you're going to get tired, but this meets you where you're at. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how far you go.
Exactly. You've said that. It's really up to you. The point is just to take those 12 hours to actually do the unplugging and the deep thinking and the movement in some way.
But what people are so afraid of, as you said, which is so interesting, is the stillness and the sound. We are so used to, I'm guilty of this as well, of being able to pick up my phone and get that dopamine hit and check the Instagram and the email and call this person back and the to-do list or whatever. But the creativity, our best work usually comes from a little bit of time of thinking, of reflection, of introspection. And one thing that I think has been very interesting as I spread this movement, and like I said, any single person, if you're listening, it is completely free to sign up for this 12hourwalk.com. Pick a date, put it on your calendar, commit to it. It will change your life. But what is interesting also is that this moment right now, literally right now, as you're listening to this, is actually when the 12-hour walk begins. And what I mean by that is, of course, you're not walking for 12 hours in silence right now, because you're listening to us, and that would not be it.
They can do the podcast first at home, and then they can go.
Then they can go. But just the suggestion of it shifts your mind in some way, meaning you're sitting at home and you're listening to this podcast, and this is being suggested to you. And something in that moment, you can't help it because your mind has to react in some way because it's interpreting this thought and going, should I do this or shouldn't I do this?
It's wiring into the networks.
Right in there, just the suggestion of it. And what's so interesting that I found is that more often than not, most people are hearing this and they're going, okay, this is a pretty interesting idea. I love Dr. Leaf's podcast and this is, interesting guest or whatever. Okay, but I don't have enough time to do this 12-hour walk thing. Or, my feet are going to get tired. I hate being uncomfortable. Or, what if I tell my family and friends I'm going to do this, but I quit after a few hours and then they're going to I'll be a failure or they'll criticize me or something like that. Those limiting beliefs pop up in your brain just by being suggested the 12-hour walk. But what's so interesting, and the reason the 12-hour walk is powerful, not just on the walk itself, but right in this moment, is this suggestion that I'm giving you is me holding up a mirror to you right now. Be aware of what popped into your head when I first suggested this to you, because most likely the limiting beliefs, and I talk about this in the book, the limiting beliefs that you're applying to the 12-hour walk, why you may or may not want to or think you can do this, are most likely the same limiting beliefs that are looping on your brain over and over and over and over again.
All kinds of things, yeah.
All kinds of things. But here's the thing. We call them limiting beliefs because they're not limiting truths. They're not limiting facts. They are limiting beliefs. Beliefs can be rewritten. We are the stories that we tell ourselves. And so in that context, the 12-hour walk is a stand-in of saying, hey, that limiting belief might pop up. Hey, I don't have enough time to do this. But you battle back against that. You commit to a date. You get the babysitter. You shift your time so that you actually commit to doing this because you're like, you know what? This is going to be helpful for me in the long run. So it's worth me to take the time. It's not that that limiting belief won't pop up again for you after the walk. But when it does, you say, oh, hi, I see you there. I don't have to listen to you. I remember last time you popped up, but I still chose to do a 12-hour walk again. And so that ripple effect, that integration on the backside is how this continues. The walk itself is a tool, an educational tool for your own mind to gain resilience, to gain strength, to continue to push yourself forward. And as the subtitle says, unlock your best life.
I love it. I love that. And I was going to ask you for a pearl of wisdom at the end, but you've given the pearl of wisdom now. And I cannot corroborate with you more. That is just so fundamental to how the mind will work. And if you look after our mind and our brain in this way of doing things like this, like you've suggested with the 12-hour walk, we're actually pushing ourselves in the right direction. You know, our brain is always changing because our mind never stops. So, but you can direct that change. And so you've given a really great, not complex, something that's actually really easy to do to actually help us find those limiting beliefs and shift ourselves into another perspective. And those, once again, this is way, like I tell people, intrusive thoughts are your new best friend. You know, here's a way to actually find and collate, because you've got 12 hours where, in whichever way you spread it out, to actually come to terms with those find them and then do something about them. Instead of them controlling you, you learn to control them. It's fantastic. Well, Colin, how do people get hold of you? And how do they get, obviously the book's sold wherever books are sold. So what are your Instagram, your social media handles and things so that people know how to get a hold of you?
Yeah, check out the book. It's sold everywhere where books are sold. So online, if you like audiobooks, I narrate the audiobook, so you can do that as an option. The 12hourwalk.com is sort of ground central for all things 12-hour walk. So come to the 12-hour walk, sign up for the 12-hour walk. You can do it on any single day, but I also am inviting mass participation on September 10th. I'll be walking that day, as will thousands of other people. So you'll still be walking alone, but the knowledge that other people are out there on the same day as you. So if you need to pick a specific day, if that feels good to you, but you can do it any single day. So go to the website, sign up, pick up a copy of the book. I'm at Colin O Brady, just my name on Instagram, pretty active on there. Come say hello and join this global movement. You're not doing this for me. You're doing this for you. Give yourself this gift. It will really unlock some very, very, very powerful lessons inside of you, and you'll be grateful that you did it on the other side.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Colin, for that inspiring story of your life, from the experience with your burning of your legs to the first marathon, to all these incredible things that you have done. But the lessons, most of all, thank you for translating this into a very practical way for people to actually start. As you said, not everyone's going to go climb Mount Everest, but everyone can go for a walk. So thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to hearing more.
Thank you so much.